you'll get pulled into things that maybe aren't a good use of your time, and they don't help you grow the firm as fast as you want. And be mindful about that, because like I said, you don't actually know it while you're in it, right? It's only when you step out and you do these planning meetings and you look at results and KPIs, and we talk about that another day, that you realize, wow, how much time I spent not doing the thing that I love to do the most, right?
Welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa, brought to you by Elite Consulting Partners. It's the only podcast offering unfiltered guidance and the direct advice for all things concerning financial advisors, RIAs, and the practitioners in the wealth management business. And now, welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. I am your host, Frank LaRosa, of course, and joined in 2026 on one of our first episodes of the year by my co-host, Stacey Frank. Stacey with an E. How you doing? Happy New Year.
Doing great. Happy New Year. Happy to be back as always. And thanks for listening.
This will be the first and last time that we say Happy New Year for 2026.
Correct.
Because I think there's some rule
for
a certain number of days. You don't have to say Happy New Year anymore, okay? Because I'm really tired of saying Happy New Year.
Just for January.
I'm like, it's like the second week in January. I'm not saying Happy New Year anymore.
Hey, happy holidays.
Anyway, so today, I think today's topic is really important. Anyway, for those of you, before I start, thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all the great comments that we get throughout the course of the year. I love when we get calls from advisors for lots of reasons, but when an advisor calls because they listen to our podcast and they say how great it is, and they learned a lot, and they learned a lot about this, and they learned about that, and they implemented this or that, whatever it was, to me, that means everything, because it means everyone's listening. It means that our content is really valuable to the listeners. And so thank you for all of that. Thank you for following us. And that's why we do this.
Lots of gratitude.
It's
what it's about.
It's what it's about. It's part of what our purpose is, which we're actually going to be talking about a little bit. So today's topic is really going to be about how not to lose your soul. What does that mean? How not to lose your soul?
Yeah, actually, right before we pushed record, it's like, lose your soul.
Lose your soul, right?
That's kind of dramatic.
But really,
it's real.
It's how do you scale your business? How do you grow your business? As everybody probably is either coming out of their planning meetings, or they had their planning meeting last year, and everybody has big, bold ideas, right? Well, how do you achieve those? And we did the same thing. Ours was last week. But how do you build and grow and scale your business to, from a practitioner, which we'll talk about a little bit, what's the difference between a practitioner and a business owner, from practitioner to a business owner to an enterprise level business, right? How do you do that without losing your soul, losing the soul of the business more specifically? Because that is something that we see often. It's something that we've talked about candidly when firms sort of engage with the wrong PE firm, because not all PE firms are bad PE firms, the wrong partner, the wrong
intentions.
The wrong intentions.
With the wrong intentions.
Right.
Or mismatched intentions.
We've seen that in some cases really harm the culture that made that firm what it was, and the culture of the firm had changed, right? And so because they wanted to grow, they grow at all costs, and we need all this PE money from all these outside investors. And once you have that money come in, those people might not have the same goals and efficiencies, or goals and objectives, as you as a founder did, or when you first started off and where you were going to go. And so you have to be really careful about that. So one of the things that we talk about, so again, a lot of times we do these things, one, because we have conversations with our clients all the time, not just about transitioning their firm, right, their business or their practice from one firm to another, but part of what we say is, like, we want to help them make the right move, not just the next move. And so that means a lot of times finding the firm that's the right solution for them, not just, who's got the best payout and all that other stuff, right? But do they align with the things that make them unique? Do they align with their I'll just use core values as an example. Does the firm that you're going to go to align with your core values?
And primarily the philosophies that an advisor has to service their client.
Right.
Is because in the end, the client is the lifeline of the financial advisor. And if the firm that you're going to or the PE firm that comes in disrupts that, then you're not really being your true self,
right,
to your clients.
And so we have these conversations all the time, right? Again, even though we might just be moving one advisor from one firm to another, we're having a deeper dive conversation with that advisor about their business because ultimately it helps us find them the best solution of the firm that they want to go to, so they don't outgrow the firm. And so taking from a personal perspective, for those that follow me on Instagram and follow me on LinkedIn, which you should, my Instagram is franklarosa.elite, by the way. You probably know that I'm a huge Alex Hormozi fan. He talks a lot about scaling up the businesses, but we also operate on a system called scaling up. I'll call it the adult version of EOS. Now, if you're an EOS listener or you're EOS entrepreneur, you might find it insulting, but the fact of the matter is EOS, so traction, people have heard of it as traction. It was born from the system called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, right? And which is really developed at MIT, and it really talks about your business as a whole. But one of the things, this is not a scaling up conversation, but one of the things that you do on an annual basis and then on a quarterly basis is you come up with what's called a strategic one-page plan. And that is essentially your business on one page. Your ultimate goal, where you want it on the right side, it's your 3-year, your 5-year goal, like a 1-year goal, and then there's some other things underneath there, right? But on the left side, which is where you start off with identifying your core values. So I'm going to use the word core value because it means something different to everybody. And Vern Harnish will say that it doesn't have to mean core values. And we actually changed ours,
the principles,
after many, many years. We didn't change the actual values themselves, but we changed it from core values to 7 principles of elite because everybody individually has different core values, right? Yes, a lot of them align. That's why you're together. But personally and professionally, you might have some core values that are different than what I feel, right? But as an employee at my firm, I want you to subscribe to the 7 principles that we subscribe to. You can't work here if you don't subscribe to these 7 principles, right? Versus a core value thing, right? Now I'm opposing my beliefs on somebody. But our 7 principles have stayed the same for many, many, many years. And so you start there because that is the core of who you are as a practitioner. So as an advisor, I'm speaking to you as an advisor. You have to work through these things. So that's one thing. What are your 7 principles, your core values? What is it that you stand for? And what is it that you believe? So you have to have those things down. And no matter how fast you grow or how big you grow, those things should never change, right? They can evolve over time. They can be tweaked. But what you believe in is what you believe in.
Well, and I think it really speaks to how you work with and interact with your employees or your staff within your firm, but also how you service your clients.
Yeah.
All those core principles really, in my mind, really pertain to those 2 things. How you as an organization, what the culture is within the organization, and then your philosophies on servicing clients, because most businesses have clients. So
right.
Pretty obvious.
But those are basically the foundation of your business, right? So they want you to start with that. Then the next component of it, so you're going left to right, because they don't want you starting with the number. What's your number? Because that can change and that can be shaky, right? So they want you to start with your foundation. Then you talk about your purpose, essentially your mission, your purpose of doing why. Why do you do what you do? As a financial advisor, yes, you take care of, you manage clients' money, right? That's what you do. That's not why you do it. And you have to dive deep into this, and it takes time, and it continues to evolve. Ours had continued to evolve over time, but ours really is, we help advisors transition their hopes and dreams into reality by keeping them at the center of everything that we do, right? That is our mission, right? We want to help advisors transition their hopes and dreams into reality. Because every advisor we talk to has a different version of that, right? Some advisors, I have one client that he travels the world, right? Like he does a lot of traveling, and he's leaving shortly, and he's going to either Czechoslovakia or the Ukraine or something. He does a lot of charitable work, right? So yes, he wants to grow his business, but not so much that it affects the charitable work that he's able to do around the world.
Right, that's his identity. He brings that into his personal and professional life.
So everything that we talk about now he's a coaching client, so he's not a transition client, but he's a coaching client. But everything we talk about, so he wants to add somebody to his team. And I'm like, okay, well, you have to be careful who you add, because if you bring on an advisor that has all these accounts, and now all of a sudden you're going to have more work to do because you brought on the wrong person, it doesn't help you. It actually hinders what you're trying to get done, right? So understanding what your purpose is, like your real purpose, and why are you passionate about helping clients, and it takes time. For us, it's taken
a lot of wording, belaboring,
massaging it, and right, and it takes time, but that's number 2 in terms of what you have to be thinking about. Then number 3 is what is termed, if you follow EOS or you follow Scaling Up or any other books, you call this the BHAG, BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Gino Wickman talks about it. Vern Harnish talks about it. And that is this goal that you have within your organization that is so big that's years out. It could be 10 years out, 15 years out. It's the dream we call it the pipe dream, right? It's huge, so big that you don't even know how you're going to get there, right? Like you can't even figure out from where you are today, how do we even get to that? I don't even understand how to get to that, right?
How do you even measure it?
How do you even measure
it?
That's how big it has to be, right? And so that's one component. And then the final component, that in terms of how you look at your business, not the revenue and the growth and the AUM and all of that's number of clients, and that is sort of the core of the business itself. And that is, who is your actual avatar, right? And in terms of avatar, so I use that term. That's an Alex Hormozi term. It's basically, who is your ideal client? And it was interesting because this weekend I had a call with a new client, and we had just gone through this session last week. And prior to our first session, we had it sort of as a number, right? Like a lot of advisors do. Well, I want my average client needs to have $1 million in assets, and that's typically what they say: $1 million in assets or $10 million in assets, right? And we were the same way. And then we started really thinking about, well, is that really our ideal client? Doesn't mean that you don't take people that aren't
have bigger clients, bigger productive clients, right?
But what we realized in our space is our ideal client doesn't necessarily have a number to him or her. It's really who they are, right, and how we interact.
Yeah, the qualitative components,
right? So, what in your this is really more you than anybody else in terms of the coachability and stuff like that. But so in your mind, what do you think is our ideal client? What would you say our ideal client is?
I mean, I think with anybody, let's describe what they're not, or what we wouldn't want them to be. And look, there's a portion of any process where you have to do some due diligence, you're tire kicking, seemingly maybe fatiguing the process. But in the end, there has to be some drive, some inner motivation as to why an advisor would want to move or make a drastic change in their business to transition from firm A to firm B, or whatever their goals are. If there's not that inner motivation, we can only do so much, or any consultant can only do so much.
Right.
So somebody that has a strong why, a strong motivation, accountability. We can talk about all the opportunities till we're blue in the face, but if our end client, the financial advisor, doesn't attach accountability and a process to doing those things that we suggest, then we're really just, smoke and mirrors.
Right.
Talking up in the clouds.
Right. So we want clients that are generally that of course motivated,
coachable.
Well, coachable is really number one, right? Coachable and amenable to understands process, right? Understands process, understands flow, understands service. They're service oriented so that they understand the value that we bring to the table, right? But coachability is really important because, we might work with a smaller advisor and they're coachable and they follow our process and all that. And it's an enjoyable engagement with that relationship, right? Versus we might work with a bigger client who is not coachable, isn't holding themselves accountable, is very challenging to help bring this through their process. They want help, but they don't want to follow our direction, right? And it's no different than if you're a financial advisor, you might have a $5 million client and they don't fit your avatar because they're very disruptive to your team. They're argumentative. They nickel and dime you. Whatever it is that you don't enjoy working with them about, versus a $1 million client who's appreciative for every time you call them, will basically listen to what you tell them, goes through the process. That's actually, to me, that's a more ideal client, even though they don't. You may not make as much money on that client, maybe, because that $5 million client might be hammering you for fees. And so you end up actually making less money on that client. And so I advise our financial advisor clients, just the ones that I coach, just get rid of that client.
Well, I think that the ideal avatar is the advisor that understands from the get-go, you guys do this all day, every day. You spend an exorbitant amount of time learning about these firms, focusing on how to make the process more simplified, more efficient. So the ideal or the avatar for us is someone that recognizes you do this all day long. I do not. Tell me how and where and why I should go through these 5 things.
Right. And for us, that's the ideal avatar. And
Right.
this gentleman that I had a really great conversation with this weekend, literally asked me that question. He was like, well, what is because he also subscribes and follows Alex Hormozi and all that. And so he asked me that question. And I said, funny you ask. And I said, you are actually my ideal client. Yes, you do a decent amount of production, which is wonderful, and that's fine. But it's really more about you understanding the process that I would like to take you through so that we can have an enjoyable experience. You can learn, so they want to learn. And again, what I said to him was, yeah, we have clients that come to us that just want the biggest check, right? And we'll help them and we get them to the right place, and we still try to bring the same process to the table. But maybe sometimes it's just not as enjoyable. Meaning,
it's harder to work, harder to finagle.
There's clients that we build long-term relationships with beyond when they move. I had a conversation with one of my clients that I moved 5 years ago. We talk every 6 months or so. He gives me an update of what's going on. He's never leaving the firm that we brought him to because we did the right thing, right? We actually moved him to Rockefeller about 5 years ago, and his business has grown exponentially. And so every 6 months or so, we just talk. How's it going? Succession things, different things like that, because we built a relationship. Right. And so that to me is really important. If he was just somebody that just wanted to check and I brought him to the firm that got him the biggest check at the time, probably wouldn't have had that kind of relationship.
Yeah, there's that relational component of it all.
So anyway, where I'm going with this whole thing is that we go through this process because as we're trying to build, and we have this on our Scaling Up program, on our Scaling Up page, but there's this 1-page strategic plan. At the beginning of every annual meeting and every quarterly meeting, we review these things. So we review our 7 principles. We review our mission statement, our purpose, our BHAG, and our avatar to make sure that we're not losing a sense for who we are, right? And I do see a lot of I'm not going to say advisors. I'm going to say firms that because you became a firm, then you were an advisor, you had a practice, then you grew, maybe you had a couple of advisors underneath you, right? And then you all of a sudden started acquiring businesses. And before you knew it, I call this, like in the RIA space, I call it RIA by accident, right? Before you knew it, you were a $5 billion firm and you have 100 advisors, and it's not the same firm as it used to be. And I think that advisors need to be really careful about the difference between growing fast and growing right. You can also, when we talk about our strategic 1-page plan, the reason why we do that is because we want to make sure that we grow and hit our goals, our big lofty goals, but not compromise how we do it.
Right. The process, the ideal client,
right.
How we operate culturally.
Right. The delivery, then what we do it, who we hire always gets tied back to our 7 principles, right? So this way, and I think everyone should do this. And I'm surprised how many people I talk to, how many advisors I talk to that don't have a set of core values that they've listed or 7 principles. But it doesn't have to be 7 principles. We just happen to have 7. So that's why we call it 7 principles. It could be 3 principles, right? But I think that advisors should be really mindful about when you want to grow and you're going through your business plan, what's it going to take to get to where you're going? One of the questions that we ask when we go through our planning is what's going to break? Meaning that if we get to our number, whatever the number is, we're not talking about that now, but if you get to your number, let's say it's a 10x of whatever you're doing today, what breaks within your system?
Yeah, you're hedging and you're sort of doing damage control all along the way.
Right.
And you can't always predict it, but you sort of have to have that perception around there's going to be mishaps, there's going to be things that derail. And so how do we hedge those things? If you're a $1 billion RIA and you overnight go from $1 billion to $10 billion because you made a couple of strategic acquisitions, which is great, congratulations, right? But what breaks when that happens, right? In my mind, client service, operations, right? If there are things that you've grown too fast, that things are breaking along the way because you're not backfilling. We can think of many firms that have recruited exceptionally well in a very short period of time, and things break. Transitions break. They have to hire people that aren't experienced. So the experience for the advisor joining the firm becomes not great. Yeah, I think the point here is that if by growing that fast, you're compromising all the things that got you to where you were in the first place, right? And if you're changing those things and the culture is changing, the experience, the whole environment changes. And if you're not keeping an eye on those important core principles, then you have a whole different company altogether.
Yeah. When I was
good and bad.
When I was a manager, I don't want to give away sort of. I don't want to be able to explain who the advisor was, but anyway, when I was a manager in one of the markets that I ran an office, I was a manager. This has to do with recruiting, and this is speaking to both managers. This is speaking to business owners that when you have an opportunity to recruit an advisor, maybe they're $1 million producer, and they're just not a good person, meaning they're just a jerk or they're whatever, right? Whatever it is, they do not match your principles, your values, you can do serious damage by hiring that individual. And when I worked at Smith Barney, we had a great office. I'll just say in Red Bank, New Jersey. So I was the assistant manager. I was there for a bunch of years. The manager that was there, really a mentor of mine, Bill Leahy. I learned this from him. Because I was the young, eager, let's hire everybody, boss. Let's anyone that wants to sign on the dotted line, let's recruit them, right? And he just had a different approach to it. And we passed on a couple of large producers, and one in particular, this was many years ago. So this was back in early 2000. At the time he was doing, I want to say like 10 million. And I don't want to use his name because I just don't want to use his name. But he was a huge producer. He worked in New York, but lived in our marketplace, and we turned him down. Bill turned him down, and I couldn't believe it. And he was like, because he will destroy our culture. He will come in here. He will want this. He will want that. He will, demanding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, we didn't hire him. He ends up transferring to the local branch of the firm that he worked for, right? And in doing so, he did exactly to that branch what my boss said he was going to do to ours. And we recruited 14 advisors out of that office in like 2 years.
So he totally derailed the culture. Totally, they didn't follow the no jerk policy. Right?
Totally derailed the culture, right? And that's, I think, where I come when we talk about people that call us and they want to help us. They want us to help them recruit and buy firms and all that. And that's great. And we can do that stuff. But be mindful about who you're recruiting into your firm and whether or not they actually align with your culture, because you might be able to get away with one or two of those, right? Because depending on the size of your firm, that can sort of get buried, and maybe have a team that can handle all that stuff. But you start moving away from your core and focusing on, just the revenue component. And before you know it, you might have a bigger problem. There are some firms out there today, and I'm not going to name names, but they're making some decisions on recruiting, essentially recruiting at all costs. And I think I'll call it the not short term, but in the near long term, year or two, I think
Feel it.
I think that they're going to feel some pains, because I think that I get wanting to grow. I want to grow, right? But if you grow the wrong way, it will send you sideways, and then it takes you years to fix it. And so, just be mindful about that. That's really the message here. Is really just be mindful about that. The same thing with M&A. You might think, well, I'm going to buy this practice, and the guy's a little bit of a pain in the neck, whatever, but he's not going to be around long. Well, the fact is, he might have clients that are just like him, right? Because over the years, you find that your clients are just like you as an advisor, generally speaking.
Law of attraction.
It's a law of attraction, right? And so when you're acquiring businesses, you should, in addition to understanding the advisor that you're buying the practice from, you need to spend time understanding those clients, because you could create real problems for your team if you start bringing on a bulk of clients all at one time that are problematic, right? That are high maintenance clients. So oh my God, this is great. He's got 5 clients over $20 million, right? But if those 5 clients want all of your time, right, and then they complain about whatever you're charging them, and they're hammering their firm. I mean, I remember years ago, I had my assistant. I had one big client. I was young in the business, but he was millions with me, and called my assistant one day and basically chewed her out for something. It was stupid, whatever it was. And I called him back, and she was crying, and what happened, and well, Bob, blah, 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 blah. And he was speaking as an Italian, he was a hot Italian guy. And that's like my wife says to me, I'm hot and direct. Sometimes he was a little bit hot and direct. I went to guest. Right. Anyway, so I called him up, and I told my client, who was a big client for me, if he ever did it again, I would ask him to leave. I said, she doesn't get paid for you to basically, scream at her. He wasn't screaming, but he was just irate, right? She doesn't get paid enough to take your shit, is what I actually told her.
Yeah, just took it out on her.
I said, you want to complain because you're having a bad day and whatever, blah, blah, blah. You call me because that's what you pay me for, right? But don't ever do that again. He apologized. I'm sorry. You're right. I was having a bad day. Just came back from my accountant, blah, 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 blah. I owe this much in taxes. Blah, 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 blah. Fucking IRS, blah, 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 right? Ended up sending her a big thing of flowers, apologized. Oh. Point is, you have to hold your line, and just be mindful about that, because I think there's going to be a lot of M&A still coming down the road. There's going to be a lot of recruiting. There's going to be lots of opportunity for advisors to grow their practices inorganically. But if you lose sight of who you are and who you are at your core and what your practice is all about, you'll end up regretting it. And so, I think that's a huge difference. What we're seeing, that's a message that I'm trying to talk to my clients with our clients, right? I think that the other thing that came up, and it's sort of a different topic, but I think that's the message that you all need to understand. And again, this is just literally right off conversations we've been having with advisors this weekend. And the other component of this that I think that is important to understand, when I talk to whether you're a business owner or a practitioner, I think that's a different topic, right? It's the same thing. As a practitioner, you don't really own the business, and so maybe your decisions are a little bit easier to make. But understand that when you make that change, what I call coming into the real world, not that the W-2 environment is not the real world. I have a lot of friends that are in the W-2 environment. My client of mine, friend that we just talked to yesterday at Rockefeller, He's W-2. He's happy. Does millions of dollars a year. Has grown his business. I think he's actually tripled his business. I think almost a triple. Yeah, almost a triple in 5 years at Rockefeller. And, when you go and make that change to from a practitioner to business owner, that's when you have to start thinking about these things, right? Because everybody gets excited about, I heard such Bill, left and he went and he recruited all these people and he was $1 million producer. Now he's doing $10 million. That might be the case, but like, what was the ups and downs that he went through in order to get to that? But you have to start thinking about who you are, right? Because who you are as a practitioner and who you are as a business owner and what your business
totally separate thing.
Totally different.
Well, because you're going from just being the manager of the client relationship, right? You own the client relationship, but you don't yet own the business. You're not making operational decisions. And that conversion from being a practitioner, which is very client focused and client service driven, but now when you're shifting to what we're referring to, it's a whole slew of other decisions and culture and, growing pains and all that stuff that you're just not doing when you're just managing the client relationship. When you're doing both, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'll give it a real world example. This is just me being frank. And part of he was asking me, hey, how's it going? How's your business? Again, just how our relationships evolve with our clients, right? We become friends. And I was explaining to him, I'm sort of, I over the last couple of years, because he was asking me about like, how many have you moved anybody to Rockefeller lately or something? He was asking me personally. I said, not our firm has, but I haven't. And I said, but that's sort of changing because I'm getting more back into working with clients again, because as our firm has grown, I got pulled into the weeds a lot, maybe more than I wanted to, which took me away from working with clients, which is what I love to do, which is what I'm the best at, right? What I'm passionate about. And that's an example of when you grow fast. It's not that it was a bad thing because we kept growing, right? But, you don't know it's happening when it's happening. Like, you don't know that, like, wow, I spent 80% of my week not even talking to clients, right? And I'm dealing with this and putting this fire out and dealing with this and making that decision. And there's not all
time
fires.
Gets away.
And time gets away. And before
really
you know it,
quickly.
like a year's gone by. Now I was still one of the top producers at the firm. Not the top like you, not number one, Miss number one over here.
I don't say that. You do.
Yeah, right. But you're like, yeah. But I will be this year.
Awesome.
And the point is, we typically have this type of conversation, a very similar conversation, when we work with an advisor that whether they say, I want to be an RIA or I want to go independent because I want to do X, Y, or Z, and we ask about their team and their staff and all that. And we're very conscious of making sure that they don't get stuck in the weeds of operating the business and not doing the thing that made them successful, which was finding clients and working with clients. Mm-hmm. The client that I'm coaching, who does all the charitable work, right? He was like, I need to hire a paraplanner, and he kept using the word paraplanner, and I said, I think you're not talking about the right thing, because what he was really looking for is an operator, right? Like, you're going to bring some young kid on who isn't really good at finding assets, doesn't have the experience of working with wealthy clients, so all you're doing is adding more to your plate. If you want to, because he's a strategic. The other thing I do is strategic coach, which is with Dan Sullivan. That's where I'm going tomorrow. I said, what we need to find you is an operator, someone that's going to run the daily part of the business so you can spend the majority of your time, 60 to 70% of your time, on this upper quadrant of what you're good at and what you love doing, and that is working with clients, doing like sitting down and coming up with advanced planning strategies and things like that's what he loves to do with his clients, speaking, all that. And so that's what you have to do as you start to think about scaling, right? What's going to break? That is your time, right? Your time will break. You'll get pulled into things that maybe aren't a good use of your time, and they don't help you grow the firm as fast as you want. And be mindful about that, because like I said, you don't actually know it while you're in it. right? It's only when you step out and you do these planning meetings and you look at results and KPIs, and we talk about that another day, that you realize, wow, how much time I spent not doing the thing that I love to do the most, right? And for me, where I feel that is in a little bit of burnout, right? Because even if you work twice as hard in an area that you love and you're really good at, it takes less effort. If that makes sense.
It doesn't feel like a job.
Right.
You're working towards your natural purpose.
Right.
Right. And we talk to advisors all the time. And just because you're a good financial advisor doesn't necessarily mean you're a good operator, business owner.
Right.
And so we often get advisors that are kind of stuck in the middle.
Yep.
And some kind of go back to where their comfort zone is and just working with clients and being in a W-2 environment. But the ones that have that, I call it, being cut from the cloth of independence, that get excited about making those decisions and working with clients and scaling, then those advisors are certainly pushing a different direction and are a completely different profile, have a different agenda, goals for growth, things like that.
Yeah, well, listen, that point that you're making is why I've said in the past, and we've talked about this, why I think, and the RIA, I'll call it the RIA M&A space, had another record year in 2025. I think it's going to have another one in 2026 because of this reason. Because these RIAs that were once $150 million are now $500 million out of nowhere, right? And I'll say the practitioner, the owner, the principal of that business, is not having fun anymore because they're doing all the other stuff, compliance, working with the SEC audits and all these other things. And what they're realizing is, you know what? I'm just going to roll up into this bigger firm that has all of those resources for me, that I can get back to doing what I love to do the best, and that is work with clients. Right? That is number one reason why I think that you're going to see more and more M&A activity, both on the independent broker-dealer side with independent businesses, but within the RIA space, because there's like 15,000 RIAs, right? And I think there was a huge jump in number of RIAs that got opened up over the last, I'll just say, 10 years. A lot of those individuals now are starting to realize this is not fun anymore. Right.
Well, I think there was that whole movement towards just being able to say, like, I'm an RIA. It's sort of like the cachet thing to do.
Yeah.
The most sophisticated teams, the largest teams around the country, they're going RIA. But what they were really doing is servicing clients and growing that side of the business. And they got stuck into things, building efficiencies and making operational decisions. And then they realize, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm in quicksand, and they just so badly want to go back to what they do best. And that in and of itself will grow and scale the business, because then advisors are happy, clients are happy.
So the way, one of the books that I love by Dan Sullivan, who's a strategic coach, is a book called Who Not How. And I read it all the time. If you've watched my podcasts, when I'm in my office, you see it right over my left shoulder on my bookshelf. And I liken what's going to happen in the RIA space to the who and the how, right? These large RIAs that have infrastructure, and you can apply the same thing to independent business owners, but independent broker dealers. But the large RIAs that have infrastructure, that have compliance, that have a marketing team, that have investment management teams, that have alternative teams, all that stuff that the advisor can tap into, the investment advisor can tap into. When they roll up into those firms, they are selecting that new RIA as the who, right? Right? How am I going to grow without taking all my time away from working with my clients? Well, it's not how am I going to do it. Who can I join? Who can I work with that's going to allow me to take this 70% of this junk off my plate so I can just focus on advisors? That's what's going to happen.
Yep. And I think one of the things, and maybe this is a question for you to address because I know you hear it all the time, is the advisors that nickel and dime offloading those services. Because they might say, well, I've got a COO and a CCO on staff already, so why would I pay them to do those things? So how do you answer someone that says, it's a difference of 2 or 3 basis points, I'm not really gaining profitability?
Right. Yeah. It's what I would say that is you have to look at it as it relates to your investment, not how much are you spending or what are you paying, what's your expense, but you're increasing my expenses by X. No, you're buying back your time. And what's that time worth to you, right? I was talking with an advisor the other day, and this was 2 weeks ago, over the holiday actually, and the number that we were talking about in terms of the differentiator between the two firms was something around $80,000. And I said, so if you didn't have to do the things that this $80,000 is covering, right? How much more money could you make if you had that time back, right? Where you can go out and get clients. How fast would it take you to make $80,000
maybe one client, two
it's
clients.
like one client, right? And so I'm like, all right, well, how difficult is it for you to get one client if you're buying back, let's just say that it was like 3 hours a week, right? So 3 hours a week, if you had an extra 3 hours a week, what could you do in terms of growing your business that gets to $80,000 back? And we basically went through this process, and it was like he could get 3x that back. So I'm like, why are you arguing about this then? Why do you care? I wasn't
splitting
arguing.
hairs.
He was essentially splitting hairs, right? About the quote unquote value that the firm was bringing to the table, right? But it's about perspective and how you look at what the firm is bringing you and what your investment is back into that firm and what your time is worth. Mm-hmm. And that's how you have to look at those things. You have to think about when you're growing your business. Again, that's why this book, Who Not How, is so important. The other book you should read is called The Science of Scaling. Very similar. The Science of Scaling goes a little bit deeper. You talk about the Kevin O'Leary thing that he's been on.
Operating in signal mode.
Right. Operating in signal versus noise. And that's really about focus, which is a different topic. But read those books. But just understand that these are the types of things that you should be thinking about. So you probably have to read this or listen to this podcast again because we were all over the place. But this is important. We are very passionate about this particular thing because we are more than just helping an advisor move from firm A to firm B, right? Our ideal client wants to have these conversations with us because we love it.
There's so many more moving parts than just go to, it's not linear. There's so many components.
Yeah. And the clients, our clients that work with us on these conversations tend to have a better experience. We enjoy working with them, and they get to a place that they really love. Again, not that we don't bring clients, we bring clients to firms that they love, right? That's not it. But the process is more enjoyable, right? It's not like painful to them in terms of, oh my God, I have to do this. I don't want to do this. Fine, I'm going to get the money. But they're excited about the process. They get rejuvenated about where they're going. And because we have these types of conversations. But again, just in closing, just be really careful about growing too fast, growing the wrong way, acquiring the wrong practice just because you want to say you did a deal, right? Oh, I've done 3 deals this year. Okay, well, 2 of them blew up because you did it the wrong way. How'd that work out for you?
Right, and staying true to hiring the right people, but also having the right clients.
Right.
Having those avatar clients in your wheelhouse.
Make sure you understand what your core values are. In our case, we call them 7 principles. What your principles are. Hire and fire against those things. Understand what your real mission is. Why are you doing what you do? What makes you passionate about being a financial advisor? Or if you're not a financial advisor and you own an RIA or you are the business owner, right? Why are you passionate about doing what you're doing, right? Because maybe you don't work with clients anymore.
Right, and businesses can't operate without the operational side.
Right.
They'd fall apart.
Right. And so for us, we want to grow our organization because the bigger we are, the more advisors that we can help. But the bigger we are, the more people that we can give opportunities to come to a firm like ours to grow and achieve their personal and professional goals, right? That's our goal here. That's what our mission statement is. And so that's our purpose. We don't need to get into BHAG, but understand BHAG is really something that is, some scary goal that you have. I was working with a client and he sort of said it reluctantly. He says, because I said, well, what are you really trying to do? Like, okay, you're already doing well. What do you really want? He goes, well, it might sound crazy, blah, blah, blah. And this guy was doing like $6 million already. I really like to have like $100 million exit one day. I'm like, awesome. And I literally said to him, like, I'm really proud of you for you to say that, acknowledge that, and don't be embarrassed, because he was like, I'm a little embarrassed about it, right? I'm like, that's really awesome. But honestly, by him telling me that, it changed some of the direction in which we were going to go with the firms. Because I'm like, listen, if you didn't tell me that, we may be going down a path where you can't accomplish that, right? Or you can, but it's going to be more complicated, right? You may have to move again, right? Oh, I don't want to do that. And so that's the point, is understanding like, what is your big, hairy, audacious goal? And don't be embarrassed about it. It's got to be something that you just get butterflies thinking about. A little bit nervous.
Say it out loud.
Yeah.
Just put it out there to the universe, right?
Yeah. So, and just stick to your principles in terms of who your ideal client is. And as best you can, try to operate with those clients, because the more of those clients you have, the more efficient your business can be and the less energy it takes, and you just have more fun. So
stay in your lane. We say that a lot.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane.
Anyway, we appreciate it. Thanks. I know I did most of the talking today, but I'm passionate about this.
You know what they say about the quietest person in the room, right?
Yeah, I know.
Kidding.
See, this is what I get.
Okay.
Anyway.
It's all right.
You're right. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you took great notes. If you have any questions you want to talk to us about, candidly making a move for the right reasons, right? You want to get to the right place, make the right move, not just the next move. Or you're looking for coaching advice. I have sort of a select group of clients I take on as coaches, as clients, as coaching clients. Happy to do that with the right type of people. You have to fit. You literally have to be the ideal avatar. Otherwise, I can't work with you because it's too much. But read that book, right? Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. Another one, Science of Scaling. Same, Dan's, I think, a co-author on that one. And just grow. You can grow fast, but grow the right way. So with that said, thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. If you're looking for more advice or solutions on any topics relating to the financial services industry, or just want to subscribe to our podcast, head on over to eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcast.